I'm Katie Trazo. I'm for the soil because the soil nourishes us.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to For the Soil, a Conversation. Hey, everybody, I'm Jeff Ishee, the host of this program, and we're proud to be going into our second year of the podcast. And just wanted to take a moment to thank all of the people. You might not realize it, but there's a lot of people involved with this podcast and with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. I want to thank everyone that's involved in the effort to improve our soil health, and it's so important that we have healthy soils. Well, you know the reasons. You're a fan of soil health, so you know all those reasons. But also wanted to remind you about a recent blog entry at our website, forthesoil.org. There at the top of the page, just click on the menu item for blog, and you will find Soil Health Tip Tuesday, testing. And it's all about testing your soil for various nutrients and the makeup of your soil, if you will. It gives a lot of good tips provided by Virginia Cooperative Extension, the Virginia Tech Soil Testing Lab. So once again, that's at forthesoil.org. And up at the top, just click on blog, and there you will see that entry for Soil Health Tip Tuesday, testing. Now let's go to For the Soil, a Conversation, and our guest today, this is Mike Phillips. And for those of you that know Mike, he's always an interesting character. He is always very knowledgeable and willing to share that knowledge about soil health. And Mike is a real energetic guy. He's a farmer. He farms in Rockingham County, Virginia. And I have to set the scene here. Now, this was in early summer of 2022 when we had this conversation with Mike Phillips, and we were literally out in the field. This was a field day at his farm, and there were hundreds of people on hand, members of FFA. There were college students, high school students, senior citizens, farmers, a lot of people involved with soil health here in our region. And we were all having lunch, and I interrupted Mike's lunch and pulled up a chair next to him, right next to a cover crop field, and said, Mike, I hope I don't interrupt your lunch too much, but I'd love to have a conversation with you about soil health. And this is that conversation. Well, I'm going to ask the question, and you just fill in the blank. How about that? Mike Phillips and Mauzy.
Mauzy, yes.
For Rockingham County, Virginia. We're out here for a very important field day. I see people from the age of 16 to probably 76. And everybody's interested in the same thing, and that is agriculture and soil health.
Yes.
So tell us about some of the demonstration plots you've got going on here.
Well, some of the demonstration plots is basically you want to keep the ground always covered. If you take notice of my hat, it's been on my head for the last 17, almost 15 years, I guess, that I'd wear. The soil's meant to be covered. And so when you're doing that, you're helping the biological activities with that, you know. It's kind of like the way I look at it like this. There's two sets of livestock. You got livestock above the ground, you got livestock below the ground. Both need to be fed, both be taken care of. So when you have that interaction going between above and below, that's what makes things happen. Your manures added to it, bed pack manure especially, when you start putting that to and you organic matter, start build that, then you're on the way of having a successful, you know.
I know Mike Phillips, and you always give colorful answers to questions. So I'm going to ask you a colorful question, see how you react.
Yes.
If Mike Phillips were an earthworm, what kind of farm would you want to be on?
The one I'm sitting on. Because why? All right, let me take you. Some of this you'll hear is saddened. Some of it is understanding. Now I want you to go back to 1928. 1928, my grandfather. Now this is a remarkable story, if you mind hearing it. My grandfather hauled meat. He started butchering hogs and going to Richmond and Washington, 1928. Great career. And this story is told to me by his partner that he worked with was Uncle Leon, which was on my mother's side of the family. But anyway, they hauled meat and meat to Washington, Richmond, and in 1940 up to 1942. 1942, my grandfather got killed in an accident in Washington, D.C. Now, keep in mind, he was hauling all year round. 1928, I can take you to the farm right now and show you where the cooler room was today to keep his meat cool. All right, that tragic in 1942, my dad was 12 years old. His youngest brother was 2. And then when my grandmother had to pick up from that and move forward with it. Now, my dad told me when I was 13, and of course it was hardship for Dad because the original picture behind it, I've got it up at work, that said Dad had to, Johnny plowed all the ground this year. He was 12 years old. Fast forward a little bit, I'm 13, down at the old barn, and Dad said, he looked at me just a square in the face and said, Mike, when you get older, I want you to, go to college, get a good job, and get off this farm so you don't have to work so hard. And I looked at my dad and square in the face and says, Daddy, you had to stay. I want to stay. And the look in my father's face, I still see it today, it was a relief. My grandmother knew I had the it factor. I loved this stuff, And so from that point on, that labor of love, and if you can imagine, my grandfather also had tomatoes. Can you imagine what it would have been like D-slope, plowed ground, and loss of soils from all that? So you're coming into a lot of ditches. Bill Patterson can tell you he helped me put in one that was 2 acres in size, and it took me 7 years to get enough soil to fill a ditch up that Dad was so proud of. I do know for a fact there were 77 tandem loads and 23 earth moving loads when in that middle of a great field. That was one of the proudest things my father, seen. So when you're here's Dad kept things going for me. Grandmother seen something in me, and then it took it from there. So as we kept getting more interested in, and see, I've had great people like Bill Patterson, Randy Maupin, and Carl Lubin. I've had so many great mentors. Even in this community, I had great mentors. So I've just taken what they have given me and just try to make it better. And now I want to always continue going forward, not ever back up, but keep going forward with that.
Quick question here. We're sitting out here in one of your fields.
Yes.
You've got a demonstration plot here, side by side. You've got one area that is called check.
Yeah.
This is completely untreated.
Yep.
And then right next to it, you've got another plot with crop covers and a wide diversity of cover crops. So visually tell us what you're seeing.
Well, what I'm seeing there is where the earthworms are saying, I'm going to get out of here and head down to here. You've got more, they're not bare soils, but you don't see any kind of true, what I really see for this breaking down, having that kind of, all kinds of bacteria, whatnot, breaking down in that soil, having to feed for that livestock, which we talk about below ground. Right there, if you just take notice, which place would you like to live into? It really makes sense.
Yeah, visually it's a no-brainer. If I'm an earthworm, I want to live on your farm,
yeah.
And I want to live in that plot right there in front of us.
Because think of this too that we got to keep in mind. Now that soil right there, if you put a thermometer in that soil right there, it's going to be a higher temperature than this over here because you got the cool. It's a common sense thing here. But sometimes we look beyond our common sense and don't really realize what all the benefits it does with having that ground cover. And I've often kind of thought about out west, before the Native American, while the Native Americans on the frontier, or out there in that area. Just think then this is what I've kind of tried to mimic. You had bison and other animals running across. It was a huge rotational grazing system. And so they're going across, dropping the manure, they're stomping in that manure, and then moving on. And so just think of all that biological activity that's out there. What I'm trying to do is mimic the woods, you might say. If I can mimic what the woods would be like, in these farms here with good, having good organic matter, build. And that's what I use to tell people. Just think of your land, try to mimic the woods the best you can. It's undisturbed soils. You have leaf falling on the fall of the year, breaks down, turns into, and then eventually turns into organic matter. And if we can mimic that in here, then we're definitely on the way to success. Yeah, that's the way I see that.
Let's talk about the integration of livestock and row crops and forages.
Yeah.
How important is it that fields be rotated from either pure forage, hayfield, into pasture and cattle?
So you mean, I go back, the nice thing about growing up in a poor situation, you learn the tricks of the trade. Just think in the old times, they had hogs, they had chickens, they had all kinds of livestock and crops. Okay? So they used their manures because they didn't have fertilizer. So they used their manures, and that was around the barn area, which is close by. But they would end up using everything they had. And the one thing that my brother hated was pitching manure out of the barn. But that happened to be the most valuable thing you had was that barnyard because you got the carbon. And the thing of it, too, is they didn't have it overstocked. A lot of that at farms, you didn't have it overstocked. Even though the ground may be porous, you still had cattle still dropping that manure out. And that's kind of, I look back in some of the old ways of doing things and trying to incorporate the best of the old. Because we're forgetting some of the old, this was done years ago. That was called green manure. Before no-till, this was green manure. And people say, what is green manure? That's green manure if I plowed it down.
And he's pointing to clover?
Yep, crimson. Crimson clover and rye. But that crimson clover, look how much nitrogen is being produced there. So they didn't have the technique of no-till. The no-till really came in when my father thought I lost my mind. And I went into no-till years ago and mimicked leaving it on the ground instead of plowing it in.
That was a radical concept. If you think about it, if the extension experts were saying, oh, yeah, you can grow corn and never run a plow through that field.
Yeah.
That was pretty radical.
That was radical. And of course, there's one thing that you'll never do with me is put me in a box. I'm cycles and circles. Everything's cycles. Everything's circular to me. If you take a notice, you need to go over that web over there. Every picture on that spider web, I took every picture that's on there, even the spider web, is try to mimic what we need to be thinking about. And if you take notice, if you look at a spider web, and it's a great article, great way of looking at it. If you look at that spider web, you got all these lines running horizontal, vertical, okay, and circular. Now, not only straight lines, but they're all in a circular form. And every one of those lines is life. And once we understand that all living things are sacred, period, you won't get it. So everything we can and can't see that is living, soil is life. Without life, you're death, okay? Everything's got to work together, and I call it harmonious balance. And I coined that. I didn't really coin it. I was trying to think what the center picture should be. And I thought about it. I said, man, I'm overthinking. It's harmonious balance. So everything is connected. Everything is all connected, and it all comes where? Back to the center.
One final question, and we're talking today with Mike Phillips, a man outstanding in his field. Well, you're sitting right now.
That's right. Yeah, I'm sitting. But that's all right, too.
But we're out in your field.
Yes.
There's a lot of teenagers here today who are obviously interested in agriculture.
Yes.
What can we do, us 60-somethings, to inspire and enable them to pursue a career in agriculture?
Well, the best thing that I see is, I love the idea of having had an ag production class on my own farm. The second thing I could see is having this in a conservation easement as quick as possible. The third thing is to be a foundation to where it can always, with these good soils that we have here, to be able to teach other people. And I know even though I had to be told this, that I'm inspiring a lot of young people that I didn't realize I was doing. Because they say you got enthusiasm, you got, you feel you're always energized, and you're always looking for stuff. I'm just me. But if that's making them look at me and wanting to walk in my shoes, so to speak, I'm all good for it. I mean, it's great. And it's nothing more enjoyable to teach a young person that's never drove a tractor before to drive a tractor and then end up seeding her own ground and end up going to be talking today about manure injection all at one time. That, to me, is the most incredible thing that I've ever, because now today I'm going to step back and let them run the ship. And you'll see that today. If you stick around long enough, in just a few minutes, you're going to hear someone else talk about what we have done. But she's going to be, and that's encouraging to me, because she told me, sitting right in this field, if you'd have seen what we discovered in this field with oats, I can show you the pictures, no denial. There's something about oats is doing something good with soil for weed control. And she looks at me and she said, I think you got me hooked on research. Hey, what better way of encouraging people when you're out here? You can't learn this in a classroom. You got to, forget it. You got to be in the field and on the land and be a part of the land. If you're not a part of the land, you're not getting it, period.
Thank you, Mike, for everything you do, and thank you for joining us.
And thank you very much. You take care.
It is very easy to hear the passion in that man's voice. He really does care not only about soil health, but about the next generation and how they enter the field of agriculture. And Mike and Susan do great work at their farm. They're involved with so much of the agricultural community. And once again, thanks to Mike Phillips for letting me interrupt his lunch to have a conversation about soil health. Thank you very much, Mike and Susan Phillips. For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of The Flip Charts and Mr. Smith, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.